You can be in a room full of people and still feel invisible. You can lie next to someone at night and feel like you're sleeping alone. You can give everything to someone, your time, your attention, your loyalty, and still feel like a background character in their life. Let me ask you something. What's lonelier, being physically alone or being emotionally invisible? There's this pressure in our world to be constantly connected, to always have someone, to never sit with silence. But there's a quiet kind of dignity in choosing your own company over the wrong company. There's power in saying, I would rather be alone than be with someone who doesn't truly see me. This video is about reclaiming that power. There is a moment, subtle, quiet, and yet unforgettable, when you realize you've been waiting for someone to finally notice you, waiting for a reply that doesn't come, waiting for someone to ask you how you are and actually care about the answer, waiting for someone to look up from their world and say, I see you. And when that moment hits, it's not explosive, it's not dramatic, it's heavy, because what hurts more than being alone is being in someone's life and still feeling like you're in the background. The ghost in the room, the voice that echoes but never quite lands. Let me tell you this straight from the heart. You weren't made to beg for attention, not from friends, not from lovers, not from anyone. But somewhere along the way, many of us were taught, directly or indirectly, that love has to be earned, that if someone doesn't notice us, it must be because we're not doing enough. So, we start performing. We adjust ourselves to fit into their world. We text first. We call often. We make excuses for their silence. We fight to stay relevant in their story. Even when we barely have a role, we water ourselves down. And slowly, quietly, we vanish. What does it feel like to be unseen? It's exhausting. You find yourself shrinking your needs second, guessing your instincts, questioning your value. You analyze conversations. You overthink every word. You convince yourself that if you just hang on a little longer, they'll wake up and realize your worth. But here's the heartbreaking truth. The longer you stay in that dynamic, the more you begin to internalize the message that you are not worthy of being seen. You start believing that invisibility is your fault. It's not. No one talks enough about this emotional erosion. The kind that happens when you're physically present but emotionally ignored. It's not always cruel. Sometimes it's passive. Sometimes it comes in the form of inconsistency. Warm one day, cold the next. Words that sound like love, but actions that echo absence. And that confusion, that's the most toxic part. Because it makes you question your reality, it makes you stay longer than you should. You keep asking yourself, am I being too sensitive, too needy, too much? When really, you're just being a human being who wants to feel seen, heard, and valued. Let's be very clear, that is not too much. That is the bare minimum of real connection. If you have to constantly remind someone that you exist in their life, if you have to convince someone that your feelings matter, if your needs are dismissed, minimized, or forgotten altogether, that's not love, that's neglect wrapped in the illusion of connection. And yet, so many of us cling to these relationships, these situationships, these half-loves, because we think something is better than nothing. We fear being alone more than we fear being invisible. But ask yourself this. What's lonelier, being single or being in a relationship where you don't feel seen? Too many people choose presence over peace. They'd rather say, at least I'm not alone, than admit they're emotionally starving, but your heart knows, it always knows. Real love doesn't make you perform. It doesn't keep you guessing. Real love doesn't need reminders of your value. Real love sees you not just when it's convenient, not just when it's easy, but consistently. And I know letting go of someone who doesn't see you is terrifying, because somewhere inside we think if they don't want me, maybe no one will. We carry that fear like armor, using it to justify why we stay. But here's the truth. Your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to recognize it. Read that again. The person who couldn't love you the way you needed doesn't get to define your worth. The person who only called when they were bored doesn't get to determine how lovable you are. The one who made you feel like a backup plan doesn't get to tell the story of your life. You do. You get to write a different ending. One where you stop chasing people who don't even turn around. One where you stop making space in your heart for someone who treats you like an option. One where you no longer stand outside their window hoping to be let in when your own door is wide open, waiting for someone who's actually willing to step in fully. There's a power in walking away from the places where you're not seen. Not out of bitterness, not out of pride, but out of self-respect. Let me paint this picture. Imagine walking into a room full of people. You smile, you greet them, you try to engage, but no one looks up. No one notices. You speak, but your voice disappears. You exist, but it's like you're not even there. Now imagine walking into a different room, one that's quiet, one that's empty, but it's yours. There's no one ignoring you, no one making you feel small. There's space, there's silence, but there's also peace. That's the power of choosing solitude over invisibility. One room is crowded but cold, the other is empty but free, and you get to decide which one you stay in. The irony when you start choosing the empty room, when you stop begging for crumbs and start sitting with your own soul. You begin to fill that space with real substance. You attract people who meet you with the same depth. Why? Because when you stop tolerating being unseen, you raise your standard for what love should feel like. Let's talk about self-permission. Because the moment you give yourself permission to leave the table where love is no longer being served, you stop living in reaction to other people's treatment of you. You reclaim your story. You become your own validation. And that's where real change begins. You don't have to hate the person who didn't see you. You don't even have to resent them. You just have to accept the truth. Not everyone has the capacity to meet you where you are. Some people are limited by their own wounds, their own fears, their own emotional blindness, but their inability to see your light doesn't make it dimmer. It just means they're not your mirror. You're not supposed to fight to be seen. You're supposed to be seen by the right people effortlessly, naturally, clearly, and until that person comes along, be brave enough to stand alone, not because you enjoy it all the time, not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you understand that your energy, your time, your presence, it's sacred, and it's not something you give away to people who don't know how to hold it. So how do you stop begging to be seen? Start by recognizing your patterns. Where do you overgive in hopes of being loved? Where do you silence your voice to avoid rejection? Where do you compromise your standards just to stay connected? Then shift. Choose the conversation where you're heard. Choose the relationship where you're valued. Choose the life where your presence is not just noticed, it's cherished. And if that life feels far away right now, take comfort in this. The moment you decide you deserve more, you've already started moving toward it. You weren't made to beg for scraps of attention. You were made to be deeply, fully, soulfully seen. And that begins the moment you stop begging and start believing, because you, just as you are worthy of being loved out loud, not in whispers, not in crumbs, not in almosts, but in clarity, consistency, and depth. That's not too much to ask for. That's the bare minimum you deserve, and when you stop settling for less, you finally make room for more. There's a strange stigma around being alone. We treat it like a diagnosis, like a condition that needs fixing, a temporary state we must escape from as quickly as possible. Think about the language we use. She's still single. He hasn't found anyone yet. As if being with someone is the finish line and solitude is the failure. We treat being alone like a punishment, like an in-between state, like something we need to rush out of to feel whole again. And because of that, we miss one of the most powerful truths life has to offer. Being alone isn't emptiness. It's space, and not just any space, but space for alignment. Let's unpack what that really means, because being alone, when chosen consciously, isn't an absence of love. It's a return to the most important love of all, the one between you and yourself. See, when you've been in relationships where you've felt unseen or undervalued, you lose your sense of internal direction. Your compass starts pointing toward how can I be enough for them, instead of who am I, really. You spend so much time trying to fit in with someone else's expectations that you forget who you were before they even arrived. So when that relationship ends, or when you finally walk away from a connection that keeps you small, you're not just grieving a person. You're grieving the version of yourself that you lost in the process, the version that stayed quiet to keep the peace, the version that tolerated less than she deserved because she was scared to be alone. That's why aloneness can feel so painful at first. It forces you to sit with all the noise you were ignoring, the inner voice that whispers, "This isn't you." But if you don't run from that voice, if you stay long enough in the stillness, you begin to realize something beautiful. The quiet isn't empty, it's full of truth. When the distractions fall away, the constant texting, the late night calls that led nowhere, the emotional tug-of-war that left you drained, you begin to hear your own heartbeat again. You begin to feel the gravity of your own essence, and that feeling, that's alignment. Alignment means your life starts matching your values again. Your actions match your intentions. Your choices come from clarity, not confusion. But alignment requires space, it requires silence, it requires solitude. That's why being alone can be sacred, because it becomes the soil in which your truest self can begin to grow again. Let's go even deeper. When you're constantly surrounded by people, especially the wrong people, you end up absorbing their energy, their wounds, their projections. You shape, shift to survive, you adapt to be accepted. You say yes when you want to say no. You accept behavior that violates your boundaries because you don't want to lose connection. But connection without alignment isn't connection at all, it's entanglement. It's two people wrapped around each other, not in intimacy, but in avoidance. Avoiding their own wounds, avoiding their own truths, avoiding the silence that might reveal everything they're afraid to confront. That's why solitude is so essential. It's the mirror that doesn't lie. When you're alone, you can no longer blame the relationship. You can no longer distract yourself with us. You have to face yourself. And yes, that's uncomfortable, but it's also liberating, because for the first time you get to ask, what do I really want? What do I actually value? What patterns have I been repeating? Who am I when I'm not performing for love? And in asking those questions, you begin the process of becoming whole. Here's what no one tells you. When you're aligned with yourself, you become deeply selective. You stop settling, you no longer tolerate half-hearted love or breadcrumb attention, because now you know what it feels like to be filled up by your own presence. And once you know that feeling, you don't let just anyone come in and shake it. Let's talk about something else, boredom vs. peace. So many people confuse peace with boredom. When you're alone and the drama dies down and no one is sending mixed signals, you might feel restless. You might miss the chaos, you might even crave it, but that's not love you're missing. It's addiction, the addiction to uncertainty, to chasing validation, to proving your worth to someone who wouldn't even show up. Peace feels boring when all you've ever known is tension, but peace is the baseline from which everything real is built, and you find peace in solitude, because finally, you're not trying to read between the lines. You're not decoding texts, you're not walking on eggshells, you're just being, and that's where you find your power. Let me give you an image. Imagine your life is a room. Over the years, you've filled that room with furniture, beliefs, relationships, patterns, habits. But after a while, it starts to feel crowded, the air is stale, you can't move freely, you bump into things, you feel stuck. Then one day, you decide to clear it out, not because you hate everything in it, but because you know it no longer fits the person you're becoming. So you sit in the empty room, and at first it feels echoey. It feels strange, but slowly you start to breathe. You notice the light coming through the window. You realize how much space there actually is. That's what solitude does. It clears the room, and only in that clear doubt space can you begin to redesign your life intentionally, not reactively. You can ask, what do I want to put back in this room? Who belongs in here? What kind of love, energy, friendship do I actually want to invite in? That's alignment. When you're alone and healing, you start moving with more intentionality. You stop rushing. You start feeling, and from that grounded space, you begin to rebuild. Not from desperation, but from design. Another crucial truth. Being alone teaches you what's yours and what was never meant to be. Sometimes the people you thought you couldn't live without, they were just chapters, they were lessons, they were reflections of where you were, not where you're going, and the only way to know that is to walk away. Only then do you see clearly. Being alone lets you stop absorbing other people's chaos and finally tend to your own clarity. You begin to protect your peace. You set boundaries, not because you're cold, but because you finally learned your worth. You stop saying yes to invitations that drain you. You stop over-explaining your needs. You stop betraying yourself just to belong. Instead, you lean into the life you're actually meant to live. You read again. You rest deeply. You spend time in nature. You reconnect with passions that had been buried under compromise. You write. You breathe. You become whole again, and from that wholeness you radiate something rare. Presence. And presence is magnetic, because here's the beautiful paradox. The more comfortable you become being alone, the less likely you are to feel lonely. You enjoy your own company, you honor your own rhythm. And you're no longer afraid of someone leaving because they're not your source of safety anymore. You are. This doesn't mean you'll be alone forever. It doesn't mean you don't want connection. It just means you're no longer chasing it from a place of emptiness. Because now you understand, being alone isn't the opposite of love. It's what makes real love possible. You're no longer bringing your confusion into connection. You're bringing your clarity. You're no longer looking for someone to complete you. You're looking for someone who complements you. You're no longer scared of the silence. You've made peace with it, and that peace, that's the foundation. From that place, you'll attract different people. You'll feel different in your body. You'll speak with more conviction. You'll love with more depth. You'll choose with more discernment. And that's how your entire life changes. So, the next time you feel the urge to fill the silence with someone, anyone, pause, ask yourself, am I reaching out because I'm lonely or because I'm aligned? If it's loneliness, return to yourself. If it's alignment, you won't be reaching. You'll be attracting. You don't need to rush out of solitude. You need to recognize its gift. You are not behind, you are not broken, you are not unloved, you are aligning, and sometimes the most sacred thing you can do is stay alone just long enough to become the person who would never again settle for being unseen. Because once you know who you are, once you remember what it feels like to be fully present with yourself, you'll never again trade that peace for a place in someone's life where you have to disappear to belong. There's something deeply painful about feeling overlooked, not rejected, not actively pushed away, but quietly, consistently ignored. It's when you say something meaningful and they don't really respond. When you share a part of yourself and it feels like it vanishes into silence. When you show up again and again, and you still somehow feel like you're on the outside of someone else's world. That's the heartbreak no one prepares us for, not being seen where we most long to be. And yet we tell ourselves to hold on. We say, maybe if I just love them harder, they'll see me. Maybe if I'm more patient, they'll realize what they have. Maybe it's my timing, not my worth. so we stay. We overcompensate, we prove, we please, but here's the truth that sets everything free. The right people will never overlook you, not because you're perfect, not because you always say the right thing, but because when someone is right for you, in soul, in energy, in values, they are paying attention, they are present, they show up, they see you. Let's go deeper. When you're with the wrong person, you constantly feel like you're trying to earn your place in their life. You try to impress, you walk on eggshells, you filter yourself, thinking, if I'm less emotional, maybe they'll stay. If I'm more easygoing, maybe they'll commit. If I don't ask for much, maybe they'll finally choose me. But that's not love. That's fear in disguise. You cannot force someone to see you who isn't looking. You cannot convince someone of your value if they've already decided not to recognize it. And you absolutely cannot become worthy enough for someone who doesn't want to meet you halfway. Real love doesn't require performance, it requires presence. And when someone is truly present with you, you'll feel it in the smallest ways. You won't have to chase them down to talk. You won't have to remind them of your needs. You won't have to constantly guess where you stand, because the right person, friend, partner, family, whoever they are, will make sure you know. They'll notice the little things, when you're quiet, when something feels off, when your energy shifts. They'll remember your stories, your quirks, the way you like your coffee, not because they're trying to win you over, but because they care. And that's what we're really talking about here. Care. To be seen is to be cared for. And the people who care about you don't disappear when it's inconvenient. They don't just show up for the highlight reel. They're consistent, they're clear, they're kind. You don't have to pull affection out of them like teeth. You don't have to sit around hoping they remember you exist. You don't have to be in a constant state of anxiety, wondering if you're enough. You are enough. You always have been. But you've spent so long in spaces where you weren't fully received that you started to doubt it. That's what relationships with emotionally unavailable people do to us. They leave us questioning our worth, and the worst part, we start normalizing it. We start believing that love is supposed to feel distant, like it's earned only through sacrifice, like being chosen means shrinking ourselves down until we finally fit into someone's limited capacity. But let me remind you, your depth is not a burden. Your emotions are not too much. Your need to be seen and heard and valued is not a flaw. It's the core of being human, and the people who are meant to walk with you in this life, they will not be threatened by your wholeness. They will not be repelled by your truth. They will not recoil from your vulnerability. They will move closer. Because when someone is aligned with you, your presence is not something they take for granted. It's something they cherish. Let's talk about the difference between attention and intention. A lot of people will give you attention, especially when they're bored, lonely, or in need of an ego boost. But that doesn't mean they see you. Attention is surface. It's reactive. It's often selfish. Intention, on the other hand, is deliberate. It's mindful. It's the person who doesn't just call you when they need something, but who checks in because they genuinely want to know how you're doing. You know what intention feels like? It's the friend who remembers your important meeting and texts you that morning to wish you luck. It's the partner who listens not just to your words, but to what's underneath them. It's the person who follows through on what they say, not because they have to, but because it matters to them that you feel supported. And you deserve intention, not occasional attention. So many of us are starving for the real thing. But we settle for crumbs. Why? Because somewhere along the way we started believing that's all we could ask for. We watched people walk away. We watched people choose others. We watched ourselves get skipped over. And we told ourselves, maybe I'm just not meant to be loved that way. But let me tell you, you are meant to be loved that way, deeply, boldly, clearly. The problem isn't that the love you want is too much. It's that you've been looking for it in places that are too small. Here's the hard truth. Not everyone has the emotional bandwidth to hold your heart. Not everyone has the maturity to meet you at your level. And not everyone is meant to walk with you forever. And that's okay. You don't need a million people to see you. You just need the right ones, the ones who speak the language of your soul, the ones who recognize your light without you having to set yourself on fire to be noticed. So how do you find them? You don't chase them. You become someone who can no longer be overlooked. That means owning your truth even when it's uncomfortable. That means saying no to the relationships that drain you, even if they're familiar. That means walking away from anything that asks you to become less in order to be loved more, because the moment you decide to stop shrinking, you become visible not to everyone, but to the ones who matter. You see, when you stop settling, you change your frequency, you begin to emit a different kind of energy, one that says, I know who I am, I know what I bring, and I will not stay where I am not celebrated, and that energy is magnetic. It pulls in people who are aligned, people who aren't intimidated by your strength, people who don't need you to dim your light to feel safe in theirs. Let's talk about what it feels like to be seen by the right person. It feels calm. It feels safe. It feels honest. You're not on edge. You're not analyzing every move. You're not trying to decode mixed signals. You're just there and they're there and it works. You laugh easily. You speak freely. You cry without shame, you disagree without fear, you grow together. That's what real connection is. And that's what you make room for when you stop trying to be enough for people who are never satisfied. Because at the end of the day, you don't need someone to fix you. You don't need someone to save you. You just need someone who sees you, who looks at you on your worst day and says, I still choose you. And that kind of love, that kind of friendship, that kind of presence, it's rare, but it exists. But you have to clear out what's false to make space for what's true. You have to stop keeping people around just to fill the silence. You have to stop mistaking effort for connection. You have to stop assuming that someone's inconsistency is a reflection of your value. It's not. If someone can't see your worth, it doesn't mean you're not worthy. It just means their vision is limited, and you're not here to be seen by everyone. You're here to be seen by the right ones, so be brave enough to let go of the almosts, the maybes, the half-hearted, the ones who come and go, the ones who keep you in emotional limbo. Be brave enough to believe that what you're looking for is looking for you. And the clearer you become about your standards, the easier it will be to spot the ones who can't meet them. You're not invisible, you're just in the wrong room, so find a new room or build one where your light isn't just seen, it's celebrated. And if you're in a season where it feels like no one sees you, don't let that convince you to be smaller. Let it remind you to be bolder, to take up space, to own your worth, to become so deeply aligned with yourself that anyone who overlooks you disqualifies themselves automatically. Because the right people, they will not pass you by. They will not make you guess. They will not leave you questioning your place. They will see you, all of you, and they will stay. So if you're sitting in that space right now, alone but healing, know this: you are not weak, you are not unloved, you are not lost. You are just clearing the fog. You are saying no to what doesn't serve you so you can say yes to what does. You are trading noise for peace, confusion for clarity, invisibility for authenticity. Because here's the bottom line: being alone might feel hard, but being unseen while standing right next to someone, that's soul-crushing. You deserve to be loved in a way that feels safe, honest, and full. And if that means walking alone for a while, so be it. Let it be. Walk tall, eyes forward, heart open. Because the moment you stop begging to be seen is the moment you begin to truly see yourself. And the world, the right people, they will too.